All right, hello everyone. I am Kelly from The Awkward Tourist, and this is my husband, Kevin. He's also live over at Kevin Lacey Photo, in case you're missing that.
Absolutely.
And hello, if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for clicking on today's Awkward Travel Chat.
This is a weekly travel podcast that we're recording. I don't know if we can really call it a podcast, but we're just kind of sitting down talking about some of our past travels and giving some tips, sharing some memories, and hopefully a little insight if you decide you want to do a trip like this in the future.
So before we get started, we wanted to address the current racial climate, mostly in America, but now throughout the world. We kind of took a break from posting our usual content over the last week just in respect for the Black community, and our hearts and thoughts are with the Black community right now because we know it is a struggle and has been a struggle for far too long. And even though we're continuing on with our normal content now, we just want everyone to know that our education hasn't stopped. Like we commit to continuing our education about racial injustice and the divide between races and Black history in general. So we really are committed to that even after the initial wave of this has all passed.
No.
Anything to add?
Definitely. No, I think you said it perfect. No.
Okay.
So getting into this travel talk, today we are going to be talking about our Oregon road trip that we took last summer, almost about this time.
It was at the end of July.
So a little bit further, almost a year ago. We drove from our home in Los Angeles all the way up to Portland and then made a loop and came back down. And our main focus on the way up was hitting the Oregon coast. And it was an amazing road trip.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like we said, we did it at the end of July. I think we were gone for almost 2 weeks. It was.
Yeah.
We ended up actually extending it a couple days because we just wanted to.
Yeah,
We didn't have any place else to be, so.
I think it was like 12 days total.
Yeah,
that
something
we did.
like that.
Yeah. But we had already done a lot of the California coast, so we wanted to kind of focus more on the Oregon coast, and really just that Pacific Northwest was the draw for this road trip. So we just kind of motored through California and really didn't stop until we were past San Francisco.
Yes, the first day we drove like 700 miles, I think. We drove from our home in Long Beach to Eureka, California is where we ended up the first night. And we normally, if you drive from Southern California to Northern California, the coast is incredible. That's an incredible drive. And the eastern part of the state through the mountains is an incredible drive. But going up the center, which is where I-5, the I-5 corridor is, it's no offense to anyone who lives in the middle there in California, but it's not scenic at all.
It's a pretty long drive. It's definitely a lot more scenic to go up the coast, but if you're just trying to save time like we were, we just went up.
Yeah, normally we would go the scenic direction, but since California wasn't our focus, we just wanted to get as far as we could, as fast as we could.
Yep.
Which is unusual for us.
Yeah, definitely. So we were north of San Francisco by around lunchtime, and we didn't really stop to see much on the first day, but we definitely went, and once we got into redwood country, we had to stop and check out some redwood groves.
Yes, so really cool. Eureka, if you're ever in far northern California on the coast, it's a really cool city. It's a coastal city, and it has a ton of old Victorian houses. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a funky little place. It's where Lost Coast Brewing is, if you guys drink that beer. I know they have it a lot out here, but it's a really cool city. And on Instagram, I post photos of the Victorian houses that we took while we were there. Yeah. And those photos always kill it. People love them.
It's really cool. It's a very small town, really sleepy, but there's these really beautiful, ornate Victorian houses. I think it was like a logging and fishing community.
Yeah, it's probably the biggest town that's closest to the Redwoods area. So it's going to have your main lodging, I guess, that's if you're going up into the Redwoods. There's a lot of places to stay there. So definitely check out Eureka. That's where we stayed the first night. And then we went up the coast more in through the redwood country, and there's like a ton of it's kind of confusing because it's redwood state and national parks, and like there's a ton of state parks and they're all kind of integrated into the national park, and this is a national park that you don't actually have to pay for access to, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also like, peak summer, mid-July, and there weren't many people there. It's definitely an underrated national park.
Yeah, it's not really near any major cities, so that's probably part of it. But the redwoods are incredible. You can see a lot of sequoias in Kings Canyon and Sequoia National Park, but the redwoods up there are just a lot different and really, really neat.
The redwoods that you find in Central California near Yosemite and Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park are bigger around, so they're more, they have more volume, but the coastal redwoods are taller. They're skinnier, but taller. And they are very, very tall. It's like, you go, oh, trees, whatever, but then you get there and you actually see how massive they are, and it's pretty inspiring.
Yeah. There's some spots that you can stop and you can climb up on trees that have fallen down, and they're massive. I mean, it's insane. You don't really think about how big those trees are until you see them like laid on their side. So
yes, and this is one of the only places in the U.S. that you can that northwestern corridor there where you can find temperate rainforest.
Yeah. Just
in case you ever get that in trivia.
Yeah, the whole Oregon coast is really, really beautiful. I definitely recommend you drive the whole thing if you can. One of our big destinations that we really wanted to go to was Samuel H. Boardman State Scenic Corridor. So there's an area of this state corridor, I guess that's what they call it instead of a state park.
Yeah, it's part of the Oregon State Park system.
Yeah.
But it's like a stretch of the coast.
Yeah, and there's this one area that is called the Natural Bridges area of Samuel H. Boardman, and it's just this super iconic, very picturesque sea arches with a really, really crazy coastline. So that was one of our first stops, and we didn't do enough research coming into it to really know how to get to where we wanted to, so we automatically went the wrong way, and we're kind of bushwhacking our way through a trail that was not very well traveled or official.
Yeah, we just saw pictures on Instagram and we're like, oh, well, that viewpoint must be somewhere in this direction, and we did not go the right way.
Yeah, so that's the lesson to be learned. If you go to Samuel H. Boardman, make sure that you know where to go, because there's this beautiful scenic arch that's really high. I'm going to say it's a couple hundred feet off of the ocean, and it's all rocky and kind of crazy, and it's a pretty straightforward, relatively safe hike. You definitely have to be careful. It's very exposed. There's a lot of potential to fall, but if you're a good hiker and you're confident, you can definitely do it safely. But if you go the wrong way, then it's a whole different story.
Yeah, bring good hiking shoes with ankle support. No flip-flops, please. It's very high up and it will not be forgiving if you fall.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did not. We didn't get lost, but we definitely went in the wrong direction and found ourselves in some sketchy situations.
Yeah, it was good. We were safe, definitely. Well, anyways, continuing up the coast, the next stop that we really reached was Tillamook. The whole coastline has a bunch of really nice scenic alcoves and really rocky coastline, and there's a lot of really beautiful lighthouses. We stopped at a little crab shack on the side of the road that was really, really cool.
Yeah, it had like clam chowder bread bowls, which were so good. What was that place called?
I don't know. We can link it when we put this on YouTube.
Yeah,
but
if you just go up 101, it's very colorful and it has like a UFO coming out of the top of it.
Yeah,
I don't remember what it was called.
Classic little crab boil spot.
Well, if you're watching this on YouTube, we will find out the name of that and link it below.
Yeah, definitely. And it was all very rainy most of the time that we were there. We didn't really get a lot of sunshine, but that kind of added to the charm of it because it was just such a green and kind of rainforesty Pacific Northwest trip. It was really cool. But in Tillamook, that is where Tillamook cheese is from, and if you've never had Tillamook cheese, then you should probably check some of that out because it's super good. And they do free tours of the Tillamook cheese factory with free samples. So we had to stop and do that.
Yeah, free cheese samples. I'm there for it.
Yeah, and it's a huge factory too. There's you can kind of look down and see the whole assembly line, and tons of free samples. It was really, really nice. There's not much going on in that town other than the Tillamook cheese factory, but I feel like everybody goes when they're driving through. They have to stop and go to the cheese factory.
Yeah, it was a funky little thing to do. But if you like little local, I mean, I guess it's not local. You find Tillamook cheese and dairy products everywhere, but it's really tasty. It's kind of expensive, but it's quality.
That's right. So after Tillamook, we headed up the coast and we stopped at Hug Point, which was almost to Cannon Beach. It was just a little bit further south. That's a really cool stop if you're going to go. There's a waterfall that falls directly onto the sand and feeds right into the ocean. It's a really quick hike, beautiful coastline. There's some sea caves and stuff that you can check out. It's not a very big waterfall, but it was definitely a nice little stop for the drive. So
yeah, it wasn't flowing very much when we were there. Probably in the spring it would be a little bit better. It's not tall or super spectacular or anything, but it was a cool stop. That was just south of Cannon Beach.
Yep.
Yeah, this trip kicked off our YouTube vlog journey. They were the first ones we
right.
ever made. So if you go to our videos on YouTube and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, they're the first 3.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I think they're pretty good, but
Yeah, it was a great trip. Cannon Beach is a very iconic beach. There's this giant sea mound or giant rock that sticks out of
a stack.
Yeah, maybe a stack. It's a couple hundred, maybe even 1,000 feet tall. Just giant rock that sticks right out. And we knew it very well. This is going to date us a little bit, but it was in the Goonies. It's known as the Goonies Rock, from the Goonies movie from the 80s. So if you haven't seen that, you should also check that out. But that was the stop for us because we just definitely needed to see the Goonies Rock, and it was a really beautiful beach.
The Cannon Beach town is actually, we didn't spend any time there, but it's actually a really cute little coastal town, which is pretty decently close to Portland, so you could probably do it in a day trip if you're in Portland. But we were committed to doing the entire Oregon coast, so instead of cutting over to Portland, we kept going up.
To Astoria, right? That's the furthest city, I think.
It's not, well, Astoria is not entirely on the coast.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yep.
But we went up to Fort Stevens State Park, which is at the very tip of Oregon where it meets the Columbia River pretty much. And there's a small shipwreck there that we had heard of.
Yeah, it's a really cool shipwreck, and it's just right off the parking area. I definitely recommend you check that out. It was just to go take a couple pictures. It's really neat.
Yes, we always like to go see shipwrecks for some reason. Well, that's probably more of his.
Yeah, I don't know.
He likes abandoned stuff,
Yeah,
and it's cool. I like seeing it too, but.
Yeah. So that ended the portion of the road trip where we were on the coast, and then we headed to Portland for a couple days.
Yeah, we went through Astoria, which is also a really cool town in Oregon, but we didn't stop there this time. But if you ever visit there, it's a nice place. So yes, we headed along the Columbia River to Portland. We stayed 2 nights in Portland.
Pretty much we just ate the entire time we were in Portland. Portland has a great food and beer, and especially donut scene. The donuts in Portland are incredible. So we did some other things, but I feel like the focus of that trip was just eating at really incredible places. So we had breakfast at Bijou Cafe. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. We got Voodoo donuts, which is very iconic. Blue Star donuts, which were probably the best donuts we had while we were there.
Yeah, you can find those in LA. Yeah, actually you can find Voodoo donuts in other places too.
Yeah,
now, but
they've blown up pretty big, but they come in the
in Portland.
Iconic pink box with, they put like Captain Crunch on top of their donuts and all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's a cool experience, but they're not the best donuts in Portland. Sorry.
Yeah. We had sushi at Bamboo Sushi. That was great. We went to Deschutes Brewery. A lot of great breweries in Portland. Sizzle Pie, which is right across from Powell's bookstore. That's kind of a cool stop. We did go and explore Powell's bookstore. That's kind of right in the downtown area. And
yeah, it's famous. It's actually called Powell's City of Books, which is, they claim that they're the largest used bookstore on earth. And it's really big. It's
yeah,
like
it's huge.
4 stories. It's crazy.
Yeah, so that's a cool stop. And then Sizzle Pie is right across the street, which is great pizza to get by the slice.
Yes, this is all in downtown Portland. It's really, really funky. I really enjoyed Portland. It's really, really cool.
We did a little bike share to get around, and it was a really fun time. And then we did kind of a crazy thing. We toured the Shanghai tunnels in Portland. So in the mid 1800s, I believe, Portland was known as a port. Go get it. And a lot of trappers would come in and bring pelts and different things and fish, and they'd ship them out of Portland. So it was definitely a bit more of a Wild West town back then, but I guess the story goes that there was a kidnapping scheme from these underground tunnels that were built in Portland where someone would head into a bar and drink too much or get drugged, and then a trap door would open through the bar and put them in a cell, and then the person would be taken and sold onto a ship. And a lot of the ships going from Portland went to Shanghai in China, so that's where the term getting shanghaied and the Shanghai tunnels were. So they were pretty much forced to work this ship the whole voyage and the return voyage, or else, you could get off the ship, but you'd be in the middle of the ocean, so...
Yes, the tunnels were originally used to get goods from the port to the middle of the town, just so they wouldn't have to clog up the streets with carriages and stuff. But they developed a very sinister reputation. Now, I don't know how much of that history that we learned on the tour is actually verified. They just have a really bad reputation. But yes, people would get kidnapped through the tunnels and really held in cells and things and sold onto these ships. And also women would get sold into sex slavery, and there were drug dens and things. So
we saw a old opium den that was down underneath. So we went underneath this bar and into these tunnels, which was really creepy. And we saw one of the trap doors that came out. So it's a little bit of a darker side of Portland's history, but it was still really neat to see that.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. There were miles and miles of these tunnels, so even if you got out or escaped, you would probably get lost. And they were pitch dark, so...
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. And I like abandoned stuff, and like she said,
really
with the shipwreck, I'm into that kind of stuff, so we wanted to check that out. It was pretty cool.
Yes. Oh, man.
Oh.
I can't remember. I'm sorry. I did not do any research. I can't remember the name of the tour company, but I have a blog post on this. If you go to theawkwardtourist.com, it's one day in Portland, and I have all the information written in there, and we'll link it below if you're watching this on YouTube.
So after Portland, I think we spent 2 days there. We drove the Columbia River Gorge, which is a very scenic river that runs into Portland, and there's tons of waterfalls and beautiful landscapes on the way out the side of that. Kind of a classic. If you're in Portland, you just I feel like everybody has to go out the Columbia River Gorge just to see that. Yeah,
and it's lined with amazing waterfalls that are so, so pretty. I'm sure you've seen Multnomah Falls. It's kind of two-tiered, and it's got a bridge, big stone bridge in the middle. Really, really pretty.
Yeah, that one's
But we went on a Saturday in summer, and it was very, very crowded, and it's very hard to find parking. So if you're going to go in the middle of the week and try to go during the off-season.
So we were able to see a few of the waterfalls in the Columbia River Gorge. We hiked Horsetail Falls, which was really nice. There's an upper and a lower falls. The upper falls is a pretty short hike. I would say it was a mile.
No, I don't even think it was that far.
Yeah, maybe not even. It was pretty steep. We had to hike up quite a bit of elevation. But the cool part about the upper falls is the hiking trail walks behind the waterfall. So that was really cool to see. And then we drove our way out to Hood River, had some lunch at a great little pizza place. I remember there were people that were windsurfing and kiteboarding on the river.
Yeah, Hood River, the town is really cool, and that's at the point where you get into the Cascade Mountains. So there are you've got Mount Hood, and I don't even remember the one on the other side of the river, but
I don't either.
There are these conical volcanoes that are just so incredible.
Yeah, I think the river is the border of Washington and Oregon too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So from there we decided to head up to Mount Hood, that was kind of our original plan, was to drive up the coast, spend a few days in Portland, and then head to Mount Hood and kind of make our way down through more central Oregon. But before we went to Mount Hood, Kelly found this place that there's a lavender field that is just with this amazing view of Mount Hood, and the lavender happened to be blooming then. So, of course, with Kelly's Instagram, she was all over that. So we stopped and checked out this lavender farm.
In late summer, you'll see lavender all over Instagram, but usually it's from France, Provence. But we weren't going to France in the summer, so that is when it blooms in Oregon too, and it's incredible because it's the lavender field and then it's Mount Hood in the background. This just crazy mountain peak. I thought it was a much better background, but you could go and pick your own lavender. I think we paid $5.
Yeah,
or
$5 or
something.
$8 or something like that. There were tons of bees everywhere. I remember that.
Yeah,
It was
so
kind of
if
crazy.
you're allergic to bees, don't go.
But it smelled amazing, and just the view. We'll link a couple photos because it was just an insane view of Mount Hood. And we spent a couple hours there, and then we continued the drive up to Mount Hood, and did a little bit of hiking. The Pacific Crest Trail runs right through there, so we kind of walked up to where that met and explored the Timberline Lodge, which is a really iconic lodge. It was used in The Shining if anyone knows the movie The Shining, that was the hotel where the whole movie was filmed.
The outside.
Yeah, the outside of it.
The exterior. So when you see the outside of the hotel and in the movie, that was the Timberline Lodge on Mount Hood.
Yep.
Very cool old hotel. Lots of lakes around, lots of hiking. It was very, very cool.
Yep. And we had originally wanted to do a lot of camping on this trip, but we didn't really plan it out. We wanted to just have the freedom to go wherever we decided we wanted to go and not really be constricted to reservations. That was probably a mistake because it being summertime near Mount Hood, we weren't able to find a hotel anywhere, and all the campsites were booked up. We stayed at Mount Hood just a little too long, and we ended up having to drive, I think it was like 2 or 2.5 hours just to find a hotel that was out in the middle of nowhere. We probably should have just drove back to Portland.
Oh yeah, that was before we even went to Bend, huh?
Yep.
Yeah, it was poor planning on our part. I mean, I guess all of Oregon was out camping. We don't really have that. Maybe there's more campgrounds in California or something, but we haven't really had that problem.
There was tons of campgrounds around, and all of them were full. We couldn't get anywhere. It was...
Yeah, but whatever. When you don't plan ahead, that's what you have to deal with sometimes. Usually it works out, but...
Yep. Live and learn. So then, anyways, we decided we were going to head down towards Bend. That was kind of our drive. But before we went to Bend, we stayed somewhere a little north of there and drove to this waterfall that had been on my radar for a really long time. It's called Proxy Falls, and it's just on the other side of the Willamette National Forest. That was probably a highlight of the trip for me. It was just a really incredible waterfall, upper and lower as well. But getting to it, we drove through this crazy lava field, and there was a recent wildfire, so it was a big burn area with this lava field. It was just a really crazy landscape.
Yes. Proxy Falls was one of the highlights of the trip, I think. It was probably the most beautiful waterfall I've ever seen.
I'm going to say that too, yeah.
We were there. There's an upper and a lower falls, and the lower falls are higher and prettier, I think. But the upper falls were definitely worth seeing too, but if you can't do both, lower falls definitely. It was a short hike. It was maybe only like half mile or so, but there's lots of rocks and trees and tree roots and stuff, so it's not accessible. So if you have any mobility issues, probably not the hike for you. But we went later in the afternoon, like 3 or 4, and everyone else was
gone,
hiking out.
Yeah, so. I think it was a Sunday. I remember that. So it was a weekend, but it was the end of the weekend. And yeah.
It was not, like there were only a handful of other people there when we were there. It was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
It was totally worth it. But one of the weird things about Oregon though is that you have to have a permit to park pretty much in all of these places, and it's you can have like the National Parks Pass, which we have. You can get a pass from a ranger station before you go, but you kind of have to plan it out. Like there was no place to pay for parking at the trailhead.
Yeah.
You have to know that you're going beforehand and get there were like 3 or 4 different kinds of passes you could get, but you had to get it beforehand, which is a little unfortunate.
Yeah, if you didn't plan it out, like we said before, we didn't really plan this out very well. So luckily we did have the annual pass, but we could have got a ticket very easily. So that's something to remember if you're going to be heading back. But definitely, if you're going to go to one waterfall in Oregon, I would recommend it's Proxy Falls. It was amazing. There's this big log across it that Kelly climbed up on. I won some contests with that photo, so it was just, it was a really, really awesome hike. One of my favorite photos I've ever taken. So that was really nice. And then the next day, or after that, we headed down to Bend. That was where we spent the night that night. Yeah,
in this weird motel.
Yeah.
We stayed at some interesting places. Bend is a really cool outdoorsy town. We didn't spend any time there, unfortunately, but if you want to visit Central Oregon, that's a good base. It's got a little airport, so you can fly into it, and
great coffee, great breweries, lots of awesome restaurants. Mount Bachelor is right there, so you get your winter sports, tons of mountain biking. The rivers and things, so you can do water. Whatever
really, you want to do in the water.
Really cool town. Everyone that I've talked to about Bend says it's an awesome town, and they'd love to move there.
Yeah. Oregon is so underrated. I feel like as a destination, you don't hear about it very often, but it's a cool place. It
was really great. Outside of Bend is Tumalo Falls. So before we left town, we only spent one night in Bend. We drove up to Tumalo Falls, which was a really nice, quick drive and really beautiful waterfall. Then we were headed to Crater Lake. We wanted to hit quite a few national parks on this trip. So we were going to Crater Lake, but before we did that, we hiked to another waterfall, which was Toketee Falls. And that one was really unique. It was very high up on the hike was very high up on the edge, and it was sunken down into this gorge. Really beautiful hike. We didn't end up going down to the waterfall. It was all blocked off at the time we were there, but I'd like to go back and explore that a little more too.
Yes, there were a lot of people around. We didn't want to set a bad example.
Yeah. And we were on a bit of a time crunch with going to Crater Lake as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, the Oregon coast is gorgeous, but Central Oregon has so many waterfalls and hot springs too. We didn't go to any hot springs just because we couldn't camp anywhere, and we didn't want to go in the middle of the day and be there with a whole bunch of naked people.
Yeah, we planned a lot of this trip around taking photos, so we wanted to be somewhere. If we were going to do a hot spring, we wanted to be there right as the sun rose, so we could kind of have the place a little bit to ourselves. And that just didn't happen with staying in hotels.
No, it didn't work out that way. So we went to Crater Lake. There's a lot of hiking and things you can do in Crater Lake. It's not a very big national park, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, super beautiful. We just drove around and stopped at a few viewpoints, took some photos.
It was kind of late in the day, so we didn't really have very much time.
Yeah, but that was really cool to see. If you don't know Crater Lake, it's a giant volcano that the crater has filled with water, creating Crater Lake, obviously. Very beautiful
nice
Oregon
scenery. Yeah.
Yep.
It's at the very southern part of Central Oregon, I guess.
Yep. And then we headed back into California. And before we really drove back to Los Angeles, we stopped at Lassen National Park, which was somewhere that we wanted to really go to for a long time, but we'd never really been up in that part of California. So that was really cool. We did a very awesome lava tube hike, which we just made a YouTube video about. So head over to our YouTube channel and check that out for sure. And Lassen was a big volcano that erupted in the early 1900s. So there's lots of lava fields and sulfur pits and things like that you can drive through.
Mud pots.
Yeah, mud pots and stuff like that. And then we headed down to Reno, I think, in Lake Tahoe, and drove 395 back home.
Yeah, it would have been a lot faster to go down the middle again, the same way we came up, but we didn't do that.
we were having so much fun on the road trip. We just didn't want it to end, I think. We wanted to keep it going, which is what we ended up doing. I think we tacked on an extra 2 days or something.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, let's go to Reno. It's fairly inexpensive to stay. I went to school there.
Yep.
It was fun to visit for a night.
So I think if you're going to be doing this trip, I definitely recommend the Oregon coast. It is amazing. You should drive the whole coast. There's just tons of little spots to stop and a lot of really great things to see. Definitely plan out some good waterfalls. I would also try to hit up some hot springs. I'm kind of bummed that we didn't do that on our trip, but if I ever went back, I'd love to do that too.
Yes, and if you do want to do hot springs, if you want them to yourself or close to being to yourselves, go very early in the morning. Otherwise, like, a lot of them are clothing optional, so just know that.
Just a little heads up before you.
It's highly underrated. Like, no one really talks about going to Oregon, but I definitely recommend a trip there.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been on a fair amount of road trips, and this one was definitely up there. Some of the best.
Yes. Hopefully soon we'll get up to Washington and.
Yep. And with travel right now, I feel like road trip is the safest thing to do. Especially these ones that go out kind of into the wilderness where you're not really around a lot of people. So. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next week.